I thought I accidentally killed my wife. In reality, she may have never been alive in the first place. Update 1.
Disclaimer: the content presented in this video is purely fictional and intended for entertainment purposes only. Any
Hey Mom, where did you say you met Camila again? From the top of the small flight of stairs that led down into our apartment's living room, I listened to my mother's heavy breathing over the phone and waited, saying nothing else. The silence that followed my question was a tactical ceasefire, a measure designed to break Maggie as efficiently as possible. The woman was deathly allergic to silence, especially when anger was the emotion filling the empty space that speech typically occupied. I could practically hear her throat closing. Not to say it was an effortless strategy on my end. My first impulse was to unleash nuclear wrath on my mother, not keep my mouth shut. I would have loved nothing more than to give in to that impulse. Split the proverbial atom in my head, and point the resulting uncontrollable tempest of confusion and rage at Maggie. Fallout be damned, but I knew anger would cause her to withdraw. This was my best chance at extracting information, so I held my tongue. For Camila's sake, while I waited, shifting movement in the periphery caught my eye. My wife's partially inflated face had turned to look at me, her nose rising and falling like a buoy atop a stormy ocean current. The air mattress motor did not function as well as I had hoped. It seemed to lack the required power to fully inflate her body. With her eyes fixed on me, the dizzying aroma of brine and mold slid into my nostrils. I battled simmering nausea, which was partially from the smell, but primarily from the circumstances. Despite my efforts, Camila was changing. I had hoped the incomplete expansion would postpone these changes, but it did not seem to prevent her transformation. Or maybe the air from the motor was the only thing stopping her from transforming completely. Weary from the quiet, Maggie spoke up. It took a minute or two to work, but my gambit was a success. More to the point, she did not attempt to lie her way out of this. I did, however, become lost in thought while I bided my time, forgetting she was still on the line altogether. What happened to Camila? Are you safe? Her voice, emerging unexpectedly from the silence like a monstrous claw from the fathomless depths of a pitch-black closet, was startling. The surprise weakened the hold I had on my emotions, allowing a tiny morsel of my total anger to break free from its tenuous detainment. A white-hot spark acting as an ambassador for the full, blooming inferno I was fighting to control. I don't even know where to fucking start, Maggie. Jesus, I'm going to let you figure that out. What the fuck is going on? I yelled, reining in the fury before it gained enough momentum to consume me. I closed my eyes and released a deep, cathartic exhale. Having almost lost control, I reminded myself why I was so devastated in the first place. With my eyes shut, I allowed a collage of wedding memories to come flooding into my mind's eye. I heard the canaries chirping, felt the warmth Camila radiated when she spoke her vows, and smelled the sweet, nectareous scent of honeysuckles floating on the breeze. The exercise was grounding, and as my eyelids slowly reopened, my priorities became clear. I loved her, and she was still Camila, whoever and whatever that was. She's damaged, Mom. My wife was currently laying lifelessly on our largest couch in the living room, positioned against the wall farthest from the stairs. Her toes were pointed upward and she held her arms at her sides, as if rehearsing for her own wake. I had affixed the motor from the airbed to her injured wrist, layers of scotch tape wrapping around the nozzle to decrease the amount of air leakage. The makeshift augmentation was a start, but it was imperfect. The mechanical draft opened Camila's body, yes, but it didn't fully pressurize her. Instead, the air rippled through her, waves of expansion and de-expansion washing over the surface of my wife like a tarp flapping in a strong wind. I described this all to Maggie, and when I was done, she did not need to pause before launching into her follow-up questions. A subtle undertow of fear now colored her speech. However, is she acting normally? Does she look like herself? Broad strokes, I mean, does she look like Camila? Her skin, her shape. And you didn't answer me. Are you safe? I need to know you're safe, Jack. Maggie's line of questioning left me feeling uneasy. As she alluded to details about my wife that I hadn't yet disclosed to her, 24 hours had passed since that knife pierced Camilla's wrist, and her body had remained in a constant state of flux ever since. Patches of her skin had transitioned from their normal peach color to an iridescent, gleaming silver. At certain angles, her flesh refracted against my eyes and I saw a shimmering rainbow, like she had evolved into a human-sized pearl after spending many years trapped inside a titanic oyster. Unfortunately, it wasn't just her skin that was changing. Some of her most recognizable features had become horrifically abstracted. Camilla's right eye was now elongated upwards, forming a blue-white oval that started at her hairline and ended at her nose, with her other eye remaining unchanged. The fingers on both of her hands had fused, now appearing like sleek, crystalline oven mitts. Her legs had lengthened, with her feet now hanging over the side of the couch as of the last few hours. If she stood up completely straight, I estimated she would be at least 9 feet tall. When she first deflated, Camilla became a latex suit crafted in her image, a rubbery doppelganger. Given time, however, she was developing into something else entirely. As if to signal that those changes were becoming progressively more unstable, her port had taken on a bright and foreboding red glow. Through the haze of my worry and sleep deprivation, I offered my wife a weak smile. She reciprocated, but the right corner of her mouth made contact with her lower eyelid as she did, causing an intense chill to radiate from the top of my head downwards. As her smile widened further, part of her eye disappeared behind the corner of her mouth, overwritten by the creases of her grin. It was all becoming too much. Numbly, I turned away from Camilla and whispered something to Maggie, hoping the question would be inaudible to my wife under the loud vibrations of the motor. "I'm safe, okay? But Mom, what is she? A replica? A machine? What?" I did not have to wait long for her response. She started speaking before I even made it up the small set of stairs that led to the front door. Unnervingly, Maggie struggled to define Camilla's exact nature. Camilla is not a replica or a machine. It's not artificial or synthetic, not man-made, though it has been modified by new technology. But we didn't create it. No one created Camilla. We're not sure how old she is. My eyes dilated, and I almost dropped the phone, my hands now slick with sweat. A friend of your grandmother's approached me at Angie's funeral. They offered Camilla as a replacement. To help you recover. A mutually beneficial arrangement. Someone that could be constructed specifically for you, in the aftermath of everything. Something that couldn't die. Maggie hesitated, probably to let the information sink in. Angie was my long-term partner before Camilla died 4 years ago from kidney failure. Never wanted to get married because she knew she was running on borrowed time. Her death had shattered me for a long while. My grandmother's death, on the other hand, was an unambiguous blessing, for me and for the world at large. The woman was a notoriously sadistic mining baroness. A magician tyrant well versed in the arcane sorcery of transforming human suffering into ore, and then ultimately, into hideous wealth. When she died 3 months ago, Maggie had inherited everything. With that inheritance, she single-handedly funded our wedding, a fact I've felt apprehensive about since. After a pause, she continued, "But it's on loan. It belongs to them. They own it, and the technology they put into it. They said the loan would continue if..." Unable to finish her sentence, Maggie fell quiet, her words dissolving amidst some combination of fear, shame, and cowardice. Although it was nearly impossible, I said nothing in response, waiting for silence to pull the completed confession out of Maggie. Eventually, she relented, and her tone became alarmingly clinical. "They want to see communion in the wild, so they said the loan would be extended if Camilla became pregnant. That was the original agreement." The sentence was a primed grenade lobbed at my diaphragm, exploding into fiery shrapnel when Maggie hit the last syllable of the word pregnant. I felt myself choking on the available atmosphere. Either I had forgotten how to breathe, or the air I swallowed had lost its ability to provide oxygen. No matter the root cause, I was drowning above water. My chest burned and my vision faded. I dropped the phone onto the top step, as I needed both hands to grip the banister to prevent me from toppling over into a messy pile not entirely dissimilar to Camila. Eventually, I sat down. It took me a minute to remember that Maggie was still on the line. I reached a drenched palm over to the device, grasped it tightly, and brought it back up to my ear. Jack, are you there? I'm here. I said hoarsely, despite the suffocation I was still experiencing. Good. Now, listen to me, if the technology is malfunctioning, she's dangerous. I can't explain it all over the phone. Drive over to Nana's, and I'll spell out everything. As Maggie talked, I forced dry air down my throat and into my lungs, trying desperately to restart the life-giving circuit. Slowly, my air hunger faded, and I became steady on my feet. When I finally stood back up, phone still pressed to my ear, I said the only thing that came to mind, "She'll, Camel. Will be okay if I leave her here?" "Yes. She can't go anywhere. Before you go, you need to disconnect the motor. I'll explain why that's important when you get here. But you need to leave as soon as possible." And like that, Maggie ended the call, pulling my keys from the hook by our front door with all the dexterity and finesse of a rum-infused toddler. I clumsily slid them in my pocket and turned to face Camila. I'll be back soon, okay?" I muttered while walking back down the stairs into the living room, praying for a response that would verify that my wife was still somewhere in that shell. As I approached her, Camila did not wave goodbye or nod her head in affirmation. She did not say anything. Instead, Camila produced a smile eerily identical to the one she had produced earlier, with the corner of her mouth once again consuming the bottom of her right eye. Despite being a carbon copy of her previous expression, it at least felt earnest. But then I moved towards her. Upon closer inspection, her grin appeared almost synthetic. Hollow, vacuous, and without emotion. Something she was wearing to mask predatory intent, a visual pheromone designed to entice, soothe, and disarm me. Almost within arm's reach of the chugging motor, I stopped. The device was battery-powered, not plugged into the wall. Meaning that if I wanted to disconnect it, I would need to be right next to my wife. Within striking range, before I could decide what to do next, Camila found the energy to speak at a volume loud enough for me to hear her over the motor. "Jack, don't come any closer." Although she appeared to be warning me to stay back, her inviting grin had not waned. If anything, it was growing wider as I approached. Like a positive feedback loop, every step forward made her smile that much more emphatic, which encouraged me to continue moving forward, so on and so on. At close range, Camila's rapturous smile was disturbing. But over time, I found that the discomfort fell away. Instead, the more I looked at, the more alluring the expression became. Beautiful, even. It was like a beacon guiding me home on a moonless night. I almost lost myself in its gravity, but right before I was within reach of Camila, the smell of brackish water and decay once again filled my nostrils, severing my trance. No longer spellbound, the oldest and most primal portion of my brain shrieked bloody murder, now acutely aware of the imminent threat. As gallons of adrenaline spilled into my system, my heart thumping violently against the inside of my chest, Camila spoke one more time. "Stay back. Go. Maggie." I raced to my car, stopping only to lock the door. From outside our apartment, I could still hear the motor running. One last thought echoed in my head as I inserted the keys into the ignition of my car: the batteries will run out and the motor will stop on its own. Eventually, my grandmother's home was as stereotypically old money as a mansion could get. The property, with its creaky black gates overtaken by vines, lengthy stone road connecting the gates to the house itself, and immaculately maintained gardens, appeared as if it had been lifted from the 1920s, pulled through time, and then dropped in the same location a century later. Parking behind Maggie's car, I reviewed the plan in my head, telling myself that I was attempting to keep my actions focused and intentional. Though, in actuality, I was really just taking a second to imbibe in denial's tranquilizing embrace. I'll get out, see what Maggie has to say, and then go home. When I get home, I'll call an ambulance. Camila. She's sick. She has a disease, that's why she has the port, right? I just don't understand it. But just because I don't understand her condition, doesn't mean they can't help her at the hospital. She was already outside waiting for me, leaning nonchalantly against the driver's side door of her navy blue pickup truck. Upon my arrival, she placed her hands in the pockets of her monocolor charcoal gray pantsuit and cautiously began walking towards me. Maggie's imposing height, gaunt frame, and skeletal facial features made her organically intimidating, in spite of her talkative nature. Palms up and out to show she meant no harm, Maggie started speaking. "Look, Jack, you were rotting with heartbreak after Angie. I did, as always, what's best for you. And, of course, what's best for Nana's business, God rest her soul." The next few seconds were a blur. Everything happened so quickly. Before she could say another word, my fist collided with her teeth, splitting the flesh above my middle knuckle open and sending Maggie crashing to the earth. The blow incapacitated her, but she remained conscious, moaning in agony on the ground. I bent over her, reaching into the right breast pocket of her blazer to retrieve her phone. A wave of uncomfortable disorientation washed over me, along with the intense sensation of being watched. Why did I do that? The assault and the theft were spontaneous and involuntary. I've never punched anyone in my life, let alone my mother. Nor did I know the location of Maggie's phone ahead of time, at least not consciously. Once I had the damn thing in my hand, I didn't know what I had planned on doing with it. As if in response to the question I did not ask out loud, it started vibrating. There was an incoming call from Camila to Maggie's phone, despite the fact that my wife's phone was currently in the glove compartment of my car. "Hello." I whispered, "Hey love. There are about to be some men at the apartment, I think they're friends of Maggie. Could you do me a favor and grab a case of documents from under her truck bed? The key should be in the pocket opposite to where her phone was." At first, I didn't think it was actually Camila on the other line. The voice was much too low. When it hit the word friends, however, the voice self-corrected and rapidly increased its pitch by multiple octaves. It then sounded more like Camila, but it was still a little too high. When she finally arrived at the word key, the pitch dropped a few semitones, and I finally heard something that convincingly sounded like my wife. "How, Camila, how did?" "Oh. Well, I'm at home, but I'm there at your grandmother's house, too. Mostly in you, a little in Maggie. Enough to know what she's thinking, at least. And what she's thinking is bad for both of us." I couldn't focus on understanding what Camila was trying to tell me. Instead, I remained preoccupied by the strangeness of what was supposedly my wife's voice. Although the tone was finally correct, the quality of her voice was horribly wrong, frayed and hollow, like it was coming from a megaphone. Before Camila could say anything else, there was a male voice yelling something in the call's background. There was a scream, a few gunshots, and then there was silence. "Camila? Hello?" The call had dropped. I tried using Maggie's phone to call Camila back. Although the call went to her phone, ringing softly in the glove compartment, she never picked up. It must not work that way. I need to get home. I found myself physically unable to leave without first following Camila's instructions. However, my hands were unwilling to open the driver's side door, no matter how much mental pressure I exerted. They just wouldn't listen to that particular demand until the assigned task was completed. Reluctantly, I walked over to retrieve Maggie's car keys. As I did, I experienced a subtle pain in the knuckle that had delivered the haymaker. Not the discomfort and the ache from the punch itself, a new, different pain. It was a piercing, twisting sensation, similar to the pinch that accompanies a mosquito bite. At first, I thought it was nothing, but when my blood-stained hand entered her blazer pocket, sunlight reflected off something receding into the skin around my knuckle. A sliver of iridescent, wiggling fabric, burrowing into the flesh of my hand until I could see it no longer. It looked like a tiny, cylindrical fragment of Camila's altered skin. Unsure of what else to do, I followed my wife's instructions, found the box of documents concealed in my mother's truck bed, and loaded them into my car. By that time, Maggie was getting to her feet. She was unsteady though, likely concussed, so she had no chance of stopping me. I heard her say one last thing before I got into my car and sped back to our apartment. However, it's anti-helix. The regulator. They're broken. I don't have a lot of time to detail the state of the apartment upon my return. I am currently on the run. When I arrived home yesterday, the door was ajar, and the hallway smelled nauseatingly metallic. Coagulated blood, viscera, and bone fragments inundated the area around where Camila had been lying. No obvious bodies were visible. The leather of the couch that Camila had been lying on was burnt and blackened like lightning had struck it. I don't know who or what died there. But my wife was nowhere to be seen, and she hasn't called Maggie's phone since I left my grandmother's estate. I bolted. Didn't grab a single thing before I left. Now, I'm posted up in my car on a secluded stretch of country road, reviewing the contents of the crate that Camila instructed me to steal. Although forced me to steal may ultimately be more accurate, all the documents, except one, are records of a deep-sea mining operation that occurred between 1999 and 2016. Stapled to the bottom of the box, there is a torn page from what I'm assuming is an old book of poetry. The title of the poem is De onde Lucifer pusu, bro tu fio de Deus. Portuguese to English, it reads, From where Lucifer landed, God thread sprouted. The title of the deep-sea mining operation is listed as Dias Fibras 3, which translates to God thread or God twine, depending on which Google translator you use. Working on transcribing and uploading them now, Jack.